Hey everyone, Jonathan Bailor here. We definitely have an exciting, potentially provocative, and who knows, controversial / fun show for sure. I don't know how controversial it'll be because there's quite a bit of science we'll be sharing, but we're here with a multi-time New York Times best-selling author, just a wonderful man who's changing lives all across the country. His new book is called Unleash the Power of the Female Brain, so it will resonate with a large number of our audience members. We have none other than Dr. Daniel Amen here with us today. Dr. Amen, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, Jonathan, thanks so much for having me.
Well, Dr. Amen, just to back up, can you, before we get into your new work, can you tell us in general your area of expertise, your unique take on health, mental health, physical health, because it is quite unique?
Well, I'm a psychiatrist by training, and for the last 22 years, I've been looking at people's brains. So the expertise we have at the Amen Clinics is helping people with ADD, anxiety, depression, addictions, and weight issues manage their health, but we let the brain guide us. And, you know, most people think if they're overweight that it's a willpower issue or they get their stomach stapled. And I think stapling your stomach is working on the wrong organ because it is your brain that pushes you away from the table, telling you that you've had enough, or it's your brain. It gives you permission to have the third bowl of ice cream that makes you look and feel like a blob. And so our sort of unique take on the world is change your brain, and when you do, you change your life.
And Dr. Amen, the interesting, very, very interesting thing about your work is in many ways, and this is very different from a lot of the people out there. I mean, you have a wonderful website, amenclinics.com, but there's many websites, and there's a lot of people saying a lot of stuff, but in fact, you can prove through various tests, your brain image scanning, you're not just making up theories, right? You are saying, we have done this, and we can prove it. Look at these tests.
So that's the exciting thing. You know, I often say we can make your brain better, and I can prove it. And we actually have the world's largest database of brain scans related to behavior. We've done more than 80,000 over the last 22 years. And it's so exciting because it teaches you some very important things to do to optimize your life. So, for example, alcohol is really not a health food. And avoiding things that hurt your brain really has to be part of the life of someone who wants to have a better brain and a better life. So I basically have been able to boil it down to three things that if people did these three things would dramatically be healthier. And the first one is brain envy. You have to care. Nobody cares about their brain. You know, we let little kids hit soccer balls with their heads. We cheer at football games or at mixed martial arts matches. And it's like, come on, that's so stupid. The brain is soft. Your skull is hard. Your brain runs everything in your life. Why would you ever subject it to repeated injuries? It's just not smart. So, and I live in Southern California, and I often say people care more about their faces, their boobs, their bellies, and their butts than they do their brain, which is really crazy because it's your brain that helps you be happy. It's your brain that helps you behave right so your spouse doesn't leave you. It's your brain that gets you a promotion at work. It's the brain. So that's the first thing, brain envy. You have to care. The second one is avoid things that hurt it, like drugs, should be obvious, head injuries should be obvious. But some of the things that are not obvious are hypertension hurts your brain, diabetes hurts your brain, obesity hurts your brain. All of those things have been associated with brain atrophy. And so avoiding things that hurt it is just absolutely critical. And then the last one is doing things that help it. I mean, really developing brain healthy. habits, from the right diet for your brain, physical exercise, but not too much, the right nutrients. There's a whole plan that we have on how to put brain healthy habits into your life that make a radical positive difference for you.
Well, and Dr. I would hypothesize that which is good for the brain oftentimes manifests itself out the body, potentially vice versa. But have you found things that are helpful to the brain may actually manifest themselves in forms of the body, or does that?
Well, a lot of people think that alcohol is actually good for your heart, and there are some studies that suggest that that's true, but it's really not good for your brain, especially if people drink every day. People who drink every day have smaller brains, and I always say when it comes to the brain, size matters. There's some evidence that intense aerobic exercise can be really helpful, except over-exercise in our experience is just toxic for brain function. So too much stress, so think a marathon, is associated with higher cortisol levels, which damages cells in an area of the brain called the hippocampus, which is where long-term memories are formed.
So when you feel delusional after your 2-hour cardio adventure, it's not just that you have low blood sugar and that you're out of energy. You may actually do some damage to your brain.
Right. So I like
go ahead.
smart exercise, which, in my mind, weightlifting actually is really important because the stronger you are as you age, the less likely you are to get Alzheimer's disease. And then I like things like walking with bursts. It just seems to make the most sense to me on the research that I've seen is, and people do this massive exercise for weight loss, and it's never been shown to be very effective. What's really effective for weight loss is getting your mind right and your food right. Exercise is good for a lot of things, including treating depression, helping your bones, helping your vascular tone, but to be over-exercising for weight is generally not a good idea.
Oh, absolutely. I often use an analogy. For example, reading is wonderful. It's great to read. Reading is wonderful, but if you're reading with the hopes of losing weight, you're going to be very happy. So I think the same thing sometimes applies to these more traditional forms of exercise, and I'm so delighted to hear that your decades and decades of clinical research affirms what we spend a lot of time talking about on the show, which is more intelligent exercise or burst-based exercise as well as resistance-based exercise. That's excellent. And talking about foods, Doctor, have you found that there are foods or beverages which are almost like a medicine to the brain that has healing and
Well, in my new book, Unleash the Power of the Female Brain, there's a whole chapter on food. And the longer I do this, the more important it becomes. And women tend to go for carbs, and I totally get why they do. Because simple carbohydrates boost serotonin to the brain. And in a study from Canada, women were actually found to have 52% less serotonin than males. That's very important. So my whole new book, in some ways, is based around that thought, that serotonin is the chemical that keeps you happy and relaxed and not worried. And if serotonin levels are low, there's a higher incidence of things like anxiety and depression, which women have twice as much as men. And so simple carbohydrates they raise serotonin levels. And so we understand why they go after bread, candy, cake, pasta, but in the long run, they're making them sick. So short-term benefit, you feel better. Long-term problem, it increases your risk of obesity, diabetes, hypertension, and cancer. So what are the natural ways to boost serotonin? And food just happens to be one of the natural ways to do it. So, for example, having garbanzo beans boosts serotonin. Having smart carbs like sweet potatoes boosts serotonin. And I love the fact that you can actually use food to manipulate your mind. So think about with me, what do we usually feed kids in the morning?
Simple carbs.
Simple carbs, sugar, right? Whether it's bread, not pasta, but waffles, pancakes with liquid sugar, muffins, Pop-Tarts, donuts. And then we tell them to go to school and focus.
And pay attention, exactly.
But what happens when you give someone a slug of sugar is it boosts serotonin levels in the brain, and they make them happy and less worried, but also less able to focus. And so we have all these children diagnosed with ADD, when in fact, if we put them on the right diet, and there's actually research that bears this out, that being on a high protein diet decreases the need for medication. Children who were put on an elimination diet basically got rid of all the crap in their diet. 3 months later, had a 73% of them had more than a 50% reduction in symptoms. It's the same response as if we had given them Ritalin. And so you can manage your mind with food. And it's like, well, how exciting is that? Because the right food has no bad side effects.
Exactly.
It only has good side effects. And isn't that really the smart thing to do? Where I went to medical school, they taught us first do no harm.
Yep.
And the treatment should always be the least toxic, most effective treatment. Well, I'm totally on board because, being a psychiatrist for 30 years, I've made plenty of people worse. And I don't want to do that anymore. So the treatment our method at the Amen Clinics is actually very clear. We take very detailed histories. We really get to know our patients. And then we look at their brains. And we also do some lab tests because if your thyroid's off, your depression's not getting better. And so we have very targeted diagnoses based on how your brain looks and how your labs are and what you're concerned about. But the other thing that we do, so our treatment plans are targeted. The other thing we do is we want to go even farther and boost the reserve in your brain so you're even better than when you were the last time you were well. So that if you go through things like stress, hormonal changes, and aging, that your brain is even better than before. And it takes by planting brain healthy habits in your life.
Dr. Amen, it resonates so deeply with me, and it makes so much sense. In fact, it almost seems like it's common sense. In fact, when we say, all the children who have attention deficit disorders at the same time, we realize that we're teaching children something there's no resemblance to fed them historically. I mean, why, if we fed our children, if our children were constantly drunk, and people were like, wow, like your constantly drunk child really seems to be uninhibited. And we're like, well, that's because you're constantly feeding them alcohol. Well, we do something similar with a substance such as sugar or refined starches, which are just one step away from sugar. And how are we not realizing how damaging this is? Like, why is it even legal?
Well, I mean, there are whole industries that are built on making you fat, depressed, and feeble-minded, and they have powerful lobbyists. So, even as something as simple as putting calories on the menu, it's been part of the law, but no one's implementing it. And, it's like, well, how do they get away with that? Because they're powerful lobbies protecting the corporations, but not the individual. And so our goal is really to create warriors for your health, that we want to create a revolution around brain health and physical health. And they're really not different. Because, ultimately what's good for your brain is good for your body when you really think about it.
Well, I love that you say change your brain, actually physically change your brain, because I think that concept of changing the brain / changing the way your body works is very distinct from the traditional approach to wellness, right? Which is often like take your existing body and just starve it, or via deprivation of food or via excessive energy. But we all know intuitively that you can never change a system just by putting less things into it. Like, you're just slowing the system down or depriving the system. Real change doesn't come from depriving the system. It comes from changing the system in and of itself. So you already mentioned some techniques we could use to change our system. What have you found? I mean, I'm sure it's different on an individual basis, but what are some things we could start doing today? Obviously, there's avoiding sugars and things like that. And there's the higher intensity, smarter exercise. But are there other techniques we could use to actually change our brain and then change our body?
Well, the first thing, if people want to live well and live long, the first part of that is learning how to make good decisions. So it's actually the quality of the decisions that you make that make the biggest difference in your life. And so that comes from a healthier brain. So if I can get people to start thinking about their brain and planting brain healthy habits, that would be really good. So one simple thing I talk about in the new book, Unleash the Power of the Female Brain, is planting these 2 words in your head. Then what? If I do this, then what happens? If I say this, then what happens? So getting out of the power of now and into the power of what do I want, and does my behavior get me what I want? So being well is as much a thinking exercise as it is an eating exercise or physical exercise. And too many people have undisciplined minds. They have what I talk about in the book, monkey minds, where their mind's just all over the place, as opposed to being a sharp, disciplined tool that helps you really get what you want. And so the first thing is great decision-making. And the second, there's a chapter in the new book on getting control of the female brain. Now, that's not a handbook for men. It's really, how do you deal with cravings, obesity, and addictions? And the first thing you do is you always protect the blood flow in your brain, because when blood flow to the brain goes low, your decisions go to hell. And so what protects that? You have to eat. These 500 calorie a day diets, I hate them. They're terrible. When you do not give your brain enough nutrients, your brain actually starts to eat itself. And so protecting your blood sugar at all costs. That means protein at each meal. It means eating enough so that your blood sugar does not go low, at which point you then become ravenous and have no control over yourself. It also means you have to really work on your sleep. People who get less than 7 hours of sleep at night have lower overall blood flow to their brain, and that means more bad decisions. So sleep and eating right, and I'm never about deprivation. I'm about abundance. It's just abundance of the smart things. Think about it. If you had $1 million racehorse, would you ever feed it junk food? Only if you were an idiot. But think, and you are worth so much more. You know, everybody that's listening to this, they are worth so much more, but we don't act as if we're valuable. That we can just put any piece of garbage down our throats and then be upset that our brain and our body doesn't work properly. It's like, no, this is serious. And if I loved myself, I would not think of giving up cookies and cake and donuts as deprivation. I would think of eating those things as deprivation of what I really wanted, which is my health. And so, you know, as much as anything, it's mindset, the right habits, and then to know what your type is. It's probably one of the biggest things I've learned from our imaging work is that all people who are overweight or anxious or depressed or addicted, they're not all one thing. We've learned that from our imaging work. They're impulsive overeaters, compulsive overeaters. They have radically different brains and they need radically different strategies. There are anxious overeaters and sad overeaters. Knowing your type of brain allows you to target treatment specifically to you. And the whole industry is based on do this one program and everybody will get this positive result. But the reason that there are 8,000 programs is because no one tailors it to an individual person's need. And that's one of the things we've done very successfully and we're very excited to share.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Dr. Ammon, profound contribution and level of science and proof you bring to the table is phenomenal. But one thing you mentioned there, which I do like, is you talk about the importance of an individualized program. One thing that is a global truth I always want to focus on is you mentioned when you don't eat cake, you don't eat cookies, that's not an act of deprivation. Because in every choice we are in some ways depriving ourselves of something. Like if you don't deprive yourself of these junk foods, you are depriving yourself of something else. And so there's no avoiding. If you pick up one end, if you're going to pick up the other end. There's just have to choose what's most important to us.
And getting that right is so important. Getting your mind right is just so important to living the life that you deserve. Because ultimately, it starts between your ears.
And it sounds like, based on the title of your new book, which is Unleash the Power of the Female Brain, and anecdotally, in my work, I've heard that often you will have men who, quote-unquote, accidentally burn fat. Like, they don't really mean to. It almost just kind of happens. But I have yet to really ever come across a woman, especially a woman who is potentially pre- or post-menopausal, who has ever accidentally achieved success here. And I also know there's some significant differences in brain function. So what is it about the female brain that can make this issue of health and wellness, and particularly leanness more challenging?
Well, so this book is based on a study I did of 46,000 brain scans. So, again, we have the world's largest database of scans, and we took a group of them and we compared male and female brains. And one of the reasons I did that is I have 5 sisters, 3 daughters, 14 nieces, and 2 granddaughters.
Oh my
I
God.
am surrounded by the female brain.
So it was for your own survival more than anything.
It absolutely was. But what we found was that the female brain is actually more active in about 85% of the brain. It was just amazing what we saw. And it goes with the study I mentioned earlier about females have less serotonin, so they also have better frontal lobe function. So our study really helped explain the strengths and vulnerabilities of the female brain. So the strengths are empathy, intuition, collaboration, self-control, which is why women go to jail 14 times less than males, and appropriate worry. Now, what does that mean? Appropriate worry means they're concerned enough to do something about the problems they have. And a lot of people don't see worry as a strength, but the don't worry, be happy people, more often men on motorcycles, die the earliest from accidents or preventable illnesses. So a little worry is a good thing. But this low level of serotonin makes women also, unfortunately, more vulnerable to anxiety, depression, insomnia, pain, eating disorders, body image distortions, and being unable to turn off their thoughts. And so women are wired for leadership. It's just real clear from the imaging work that I do that the front part of the brain, which is called the executive part of the brain, is more active in women. But they don't unleash their power often because the issues they struggle with of self-doubt, anxiety, depression, and so on. And so learning how to overcome those, and there are very specific plans in the book, from diet, exercise, hormones, simple supplements, correcting the automatic negative thoughts they have, to take care of the vulnerability so they can truly unleash their power. And I'm so excited about this because I know it is women who will change the world. That women are the health leaders in their families. They're typically the leaders of their families when it comes to their home and to their children. And if mama's habits are healthy, the kids tend to be healthy. If her habits are not healthy, the kids and her husband tend not to be healthy. Now, some women get after me and says, "Oh, I'm making them feel guilty." No, I'm just speaking the truth. We did a health program at Saddleback Church, one of the largest churches in the world. Mehmet Oz, Mark Hyman, and I designed it for them. And 15,000 people signed up, and over the first year, they lost 250,000 pounds. And 85% of the people who signed up were women. And when they got it right, everybody in their family followed. And so they are leaders. But did you know there are 660 counties in the United States where over the last 20 years their life expectancy stayed the same or went down? Women's life expectancy has not kept up with men's life expectancy. And that's crazy. And the reason for it is they're not taking their health seriously. And too often we're looking for the quick fix. What can I do in 7 days? Rather than let's get, the first 3 letters of diet is die. I'm not a big fan of diets. I'm a really big fan of getting a life program together. And what I often find, people get radical changes on our health programs. And often they'll lose like 12 or 14 pounds the first 2 weeks. But I'm like, that's not the point. The point is developing habits you can keep the rest of your life. So, and that takes a while. We have an online community where we actually have a 52-week program to get people to get control of their brains and their bodies for the rest of their lives. Habits just don't happen. They have to be planted and then refined and then solidified. And it takes some time to do it. What we're excited about, though, is we have so many cool stories. And one of my favorite stories is Steve. He was 640 pounds. And whenever he fell, one or two people could never get him up. And he fell this one day, so he called 911 and went to the hospital. And at the time, he was suicidal, but he could not get upstairs to get to his gun. And his sister, so I told you women are health leaders, saw me on public television in North Carolina and bought my program, Change Your Brain, Change Your Body, for him. And when he got home, he had made the decision, I'm either going to kill myself or I'm going to get well. So let me read this book. And if it's a bad book, I'll kill myself tomorrow. So when he told me that, I'm thinking of all the pressure I really have when I write these books. But he just did everything I said. Too many people want to do, what's the one thing I should do? It's stop being stupid. Do the program. And so he just did everything. And in 4 months, he'd lost 160 pounds. And I love that part. But what I really loved is now he was hooked. And over the next 2 years, he lost 400 pounds. But in the process, lost his addiction to alcohol and nicotine, lost his diabetes, lost his hypertension, went from 10 medications to 2. And that's really the message. It's how can you develop a program that's not about deprivation, but it's about abundance of the right things. And it's not thinking, I'm going to lose 10 pounds to be in this dress for the wedding. I'm going to be physically healthy today, tomorrow, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 30 years from now. Because Alzheimer's disease starts in the brain 30 to 50 years before you have any symptoms. And as people really get to know this work and fall in love with their brains, they're realizing their habits are not just about them. Their habits really are about generations of them.